Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about some magical electoral opportunities we have available to us coming up between our Scorpio New Moon on November 1st and our Sagittarius New Moon on November 30th. We actually have a decent assortment of things to talk about, which is really great, especially since we are still kind of trying to juggle the Jupiter and Saturn retrogrades, and soon the Mars retrograde kind of on top of that as those two planets start to kind of slow down and turn around. But we did our best kind of dodging between these hazards, we'll call them, and we got ourselves a decent amount of elections to talk about. Our first electional opportunity is going to be kind of a 2-for-1 situation, and this is going to be unique to Western Europe and Northern Africa, and it's going to be for the 22nd Lunar Mansion. And our 22nd Lunar Mansion is one that during a waxing moon is primarily utilized for like granting of freedom. There's big sort of connotations and symbolism with the 22nd Lunar Mansion and the ability to like break free from things, to move on beyond things. And of course, that's a very helpful skill to have. We all find ourselves in periods of time where we're stuck with something that we didn't ask for or we didn't realize what the asking for entailed at the time. And there are just a lot of things that we can be stuck in kind of throughout life. So we all go through this period of life, and the 22nd Lunar Mansion helps us to create avenues for which we can be free from these things that we either no longer want or maybe never really wanted in the first place, but we absolutely want a way out of now. And so in our election for this is going to take place on November 6th at 1622, and you have to be really mindful of the timing for this one, and that's what makes it kind of that twofer situation that I alluded to earlier. So in this election, we've got the moon in the 22nd mansion at the very, very end of it, conjoined the midheaven. And at this time, she's applying a really helpful sextile with the sun. And this is why the 22nd lunar mansion chart doesn't really pop up in any other place, neither in North America or in Australia. And it's because it has to kind of straddle this really tight line with the separation from the sextile of Saturn here to the trine of the sun, because this, well, we'll talk about it in a second, I guess, but the short version is that the lunar mansion ends at 12 degrees and 52 minutes of Capricorn. So there's not a whole lot of time here to take advantage of it. Even if the moon was just freshly separating from Saturn, it's like 7 minutes, right? And here we have the moon about 3 minutes away from it. So this is what makes it our two-first situation, as we'll see in a second. But the ruler of the ascendant in this election is Mars with Aries on the ascendant. Excuse me. And the moon or the ascendant degree are afflicted by Mars or Saturn, or Mars isn't combust the sun or anything like that. So everything that we need to have in the chart as far as safety is present. But if we wait just a few minutes longer, if we go to anytime after 16:30, anytime after 4:30 that afternoon, just to kind of give us a round number or so, this is now a 23rd lunar mansion, and the 23rd lunar mansion is one that has some kind of discordant imagery in it. But also is a talisman that can be very focused on like healing and granting things. And the idea with the 23rd lunar mansion, what usually makes it more of a waning moon phase, is that its imagery, how it kind of works, is through the ingestion, through swallowing something, through gobbling something up. And so we go to that mansion, waning moon, for that purpose, like to give it something that we don't want anymore to get rid of. But the text also says that the 23rd lunar mansion can be useful for healing. And this is something that I kind of go back and forth with when it comes to moon phase. I generally always want healing talismans to take place during the waxing moon phase because I like to support the body and its ability to do what it needs to do. The waning moon is a little bit more like pushing away the illness. And I'm not saying it's not a valid strategy. It's just one that I personally am a little bit less inclined for. But the 23rd lunar mansion, in a lot of ways, can also serve that like waning moon talisman, healing talisman role in a way that some of the other healing talismans really can't. So in this, it's a waxing moon phase, and I think it blends itself very naturally to healing type energy. But I've also you'll also find videos of me doing this one or recommending this one for similar reasons when the moon is waning. So just a fun kind of like can go either way. But yeah, so you have your choice here, and nothing really changes much in the chart to make it not useful between the lunar mansion shift. But this is kind of a really fun 2-for chart. You can just kind of turn around. You can do like a 22nd lunar mansion, and then you just kind of turn around, maybe get a drink, and then come right back and do a 23rd lunar mansion on this on this chart for the Western Europe, North Africa. So Australia can also get on the 23rd Lunar Mansion goodness if they so choose on November 7th at 5 in the morning. So a little bit of an ask here as far as scheduling. But the connection here is very much the same, just with the chart kind of flipped around a little bit. Here we're working with the moon in third house, her house of joy, with the Scorpio ruled descendant instead of the Mars ruled one. I'm sorry, the Scorpio ruled descendant instead of the Aries ascendant, both ruled by Mars. And that brings us to the ruler of the first, as Mars up here in the top of the chart in Leo. Mars is doing fine in Leo, no afflictions with Saturn, not combust the sun or anything like that. The moon also is moving closer towards the opposition of Mars, but we're about a whole half of a sign away. And the moon maintains this really tight sextile with the sun. And this is really the line that we're kind of straddling here with this 23rd lunar mansion, is just trying to maintain this connection with the sun while keeping the moon nice in the third house and keeping the Scorpio ascendant. So you can back this up a little bit to get a little bit more time if you need it. But generally, I would keep it kind of close to this and just be mindful of this 5 minute time limit, we'll say, before the moon perfects and separates that sextile with the sun. And our next electional opportunity is going to be for the 26th lunar mansion. And this is one that both North America and North Africa and Western Europe are going to be able to pick up on. And the 26th lunar mansion is one that primarily focuses on friendships and on finding or bringing these special people into our lives that have, our best interests at heart, are here to support us. This isn't just about like gathering acquaintances, but this is about like finding true soulmates or finding kind of like a true home in a community. This is really more what the 26th lunar mansion is focused on doing. And in our election here, we're going to have the moon in the 26th mansion in the 11th house. And the reason why we did this was to kind of keep a couple of things working for us. I wanted to keep the Taurus rising for it, to get Venus as the ruler of the first house here in Sagittarius, and in a close sextile with the moon. So that's mostly kind of my machinations, things that I wanted to do. But I needed to push back the ascendant, the Taurus ascendant, far enough to where the square of Mars is no longer in orb to be an issue. So kind of keep in mind for that if you're trying to if you're trying to translate this chart over to your own location. Play around with that ascendant to drop it far enough into Taurus to where the square of Mars will not interfere, whatever that looks like good to you. So keep that while also maintaining the applying nature of the sextile between the moon and Venus, and you'll be golden. The Western Europe and Northern African one is going to look very familiar to a lot of you because I've just shown it to you in the North American version. I picked the same degrees and everything because I was able to do that this time. And so we've got the moon here in the 11th house. This is all going to sound super familiar. In the 11th house, applying the sextile to Venus, there's a lot more room now. There's about 4 degrees. So we don't have to be as super focused on getting things done in time and making sure that connection isn't, going to pass us by or anything. And we're also going to get, we're going to get 9 degrees Taurus back on the ascendant to be able to kind of skip out on the Mars square there. And that's going to point us to Venus as the ruler of the first house here, conjoin the cusp of the 9th. Far enough away from the square of Saturn not to worry about. Far enough away from combustion to not be an issue. And here you just have a nice, we're going to lean very heavily on the Taurus ascendants. We're gonna lean heavily on Taurus and Cancer and Scorpio in this video. Those are the ascendants we're going to use because you go from 0 degrees Capricorn to 29 degrees Pisces is a no-go zone. A third of the zodiac is a no-go zone for the ascendant this month because both Saturn and Jupiter are retrograde, and I will die before I have a retrograde ruler of the first house in an election chart. And unfortunately, that's about all we really had going for us for the waxing moon phase. The big issue there was that the moon is waxing in the signs of Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces right now, which makes her being on the ascendant in those signs impossible because the rulers of those signs are retrograde. So that takes out a big chunk of availability, we'll say. And so we missed out on a lot of what could have been otherwise really nice elections because of that little issue. And so then we transition into the waning half of the moon cycle. And so here our lunar mansions take on a little bit more of a darker side, where they're more about getting rid of things, dismissing things, letting things go, all very important facets of life, but are not sort of the glitz and glamour that we tend to see from the lunar mansions, that those more attractive gathering, gaining, and augmenting virtues of the lunar mansions that we see in the waxing moon half. But our first one we're going to talk about in this section, in this part, is the 9th lunar mansion. And this is a lunar mansion that is very much about there are kind of negative malicious aspects of it, But when we are kind of taking control of this in the waning moon half, we're focused more on kind of banishing things, like getting rid of things, pushing things back. And in this way, the ninth lunar mansion actually works very well as like a deflective, like a bad energy deflective talisman. So definitely to consider taking advantage of this if you at all work in, spiritual capacity, or if you just don't want to be around other people in the gunk that they, project onto you, day to day. So the ninth lunar mansion election for the North American continent is going to be on November 19th at around 4:42 in the morning my time. And here we're going to have the moon on the midheaven in the ninth lunar mansion, and she's going to be applying a trine to the sun, kind of a wide trine to the sun here. And of course, sun moon aspects are always really nice. I always try to grab them, especially when the moon is going to be, when the moon's in that lunar mansion where she can trine the sun. I always try to take a zero in on it really quickly to see if there's a talisman we can make from that. And so we're able to do that here. And the sun, of course, is going to be that kind of banishing, purifying light that kind of casts back against the shadows, I guess we'll say, of the negativity of others. The ruler of the first house is going to be Venus here because Libra is on the ascendant. Venus in Capricorn, hanging on, doing her best. She's not really afflicted by Mars. She's not in the right sign to be opposed. And she's in this sextile with Saturn, who I think might be stationed at this time. Either way, not really afflicting presence for Venus to worry about. And kind of the same thing with the ascendant, not associated, not aligned with Mars or Saturn in any way to be an issue there. The moon separating from Saturn, yada yada. So just another kind of easygoing chart where we're able to avoid some of those more serious afflictions thanks to Mars and Saturn being kind of separated, kind of spread out a little bit. And then here we go. Here we'll have Saturn retrograde. Saturn station. So we'll be able to use Saturn stuff a little bit more freely after this moment in time. The Western Europe and Northern African version of this chart is going to be very similar, except for the moon is going to be on the ascendant rather than the midheaven like she was in the North American version. So here the moon's going to be in the ninth mansion on the ascendant. She's going to be still applying that trine to the sun. We've closed a little bit of distance to it from the North American version. Usually the European charts, the moon is going to be about 3 or 4 degrees ahead of where she was in the North American charts because they're usually able to get similar ascendants or midheavens. So that's a fun thing to watch out for. And so we've got a tightening up of the trine to the sun. The moon also rules the first house, so we really have to worry about the one planet in this instance. And 18 degrees of Cancer, is not afflicted by Saturn or Mars. The moon isn't afflicted by Saturn or Mars. So the one thing that I'll say kind of as a warning is that depending on how it all kind of shakes out as you relocate this to your location, you want to make sure that Mars is either, really conjoined the cusp of the second house, be pulled into it, or is actually physically in the second house, because you don't want a malefic in the ascendant unless the malefic rules the first house. Basically, just asking. You're just inviting trouble in. So our last lunar mansion election is going to be for the 12th lunar mansion, and this is one that everybody should be able to take advantage of. North America, North Africa, Western Europe, Australia. So kind of do a scan over it if it's a talisman that you're all interested in. The 12th lunar mansion is one that is mostly associated with again, it's a waning moon talisman, so it has some kind of like negative or darker aspects of it, but it's really more kind of weaponized towards cutting bad habits, cutting out bad decisions from your life, helping you kind of correct the ship sort of a thing. So if you are trying to like break out of something or let go of something or move beyond a set of like limiting beliefs or practices, the 12th lunar mansion is really helpful with that, really helpful to help you kind of get started with that breaking the patterns, breaking the addiction kind of a thing. I really like the image of it. It's like a soldier fighting a dragon, and that just seems very like, chef's kiss for how a lot of our kind of internal vices become these monstrosities that we build up in our minds, and so we kind of struggle to take charge or take control against them. And I don't know. It ended up being an image that really spoke to me in some way. So hopefully it does to you all as well. But the 12th lunar mansion election for North America is going to take place on November 22nd at 6:48 in the morning. And here we're going to have the moon in this 12th lunar mansion. I forgot which one I was talking about for a second. In this 12th lunar mansion, and she's applying kind of a square to the sun. And that's fine. The more breaking up elections, the more like breaking up talismans, they have a lot of kind of customization options. in that you can kind of choose your malefic planets to emphasize and have like swift, clean breaks that might be kind of messy, but they're over with. Benefic planets tend to kind of like stretch things out a little bit longer, make them easier to separate, but you kind of have to deal with it a little bit longer. And then like squares to the sun or even to Mercury are a bit more mixed bag. I wouldn't expect them to be kind of like the clean cut that you get from the malefics, or like they're going to be kind of a more middle ground, a little bit more difficult to kind of decipher or distinguish from the more extreme versions that the malefics and the benefics kind of reflect or mirror in one another. And when it comes to like that customization, I don't really think either side is wrong. I really just think it depends on your personality type and which method of conflict resolution you really prefer. So I think the sun is a good middle ground for those who don't really want either end of that spectrum or close to the end of that spectrum from those examples. And I also think that the sun has kind of unique ability to provide insight and kind of wisdom into a situation to be like, yep, that's something that you should probably actually work about, rather than sometimes I think we kind of get in our heads a little bit too much about, whether something is actually good for us or bad for us or not. And we kind of choose to stay the same because we can't make a hard argument either way. And the sun kind of helps us to provide that information to make that decision a bit more consciously. So, that's always fun. But then we're looking at our ascendant ruler, which is Mars, because Scorpio is on the ascendant. And we don't have any hard aspects from Scorpio or like to Scorpio, the ascendant degree, or the moon either. It's just we got really lucky in a lot of ways for some of the elections that we're able to get, considering what we have to kind of juggle against. But yeah, we did a pretty good job this time around. So for the Western European and Northern African version of this chart, I initially had it down as like an 8 degrees of Cancer election. And I mean, you can do that. It would be the moon in the third house at 1945 on November 22nd, if that's something that you want to do. But I'm not sure why I wouldn't just do it as, like a 0 degrees Virgo ascendant and get it kind of upgraded to a Regulus talisman a little bit. So I guess we'll go ahead and talk about it now because it was something I was planning on talking about when we got to the Australian version of this chart. But initially I had the Western European version as an 18 degrees Cancer ascendant, which is a viable 12th Lunar Mansion talisman if you want. But I don't see why not just do this chart with 0 degrees Virgo, because you can kind of upgrade it to a Regulus talisman if you prefer that. And Regulus is a fixed star that's of the nature of Jupiter and Mars, and it's associated with like honors, particularly within like the military. It's associated with like awards and like promotion. It's also associated with countering the melancholic humor, which can lead to things like depression or like mobility impairment. There's a whole kind of scheme of physical and mental sort of ailments that the melancholic humor represents that Regulus helps to kind of combat against. There's also sort of kind of general health vibes from Regulus because of that. So Regulus is a really great star to go for if it's one that you haven't practiced with yet, if you haven't been able to add to your sort of fixed star arsenal. Definitely consider picking it up. I like this one a little bit less than I did the one from last month because I'll always take the trine to the sun over the square to the sun, like is in this chart. But I don't remember all the details exactly. I'd have to pull out the old card that I have on the month. But I'm sure there were some places on Earth that weren't able to take advantage of the last Regulus election. So if if Western Europe and Australia were places that weren't able to take advantage of the last Regulus election, then great, here you go. But if they also got that one and then are also getting this one, that's not fair. So act accordingly act according to whatever happened. Act accordingly. But yeah, this election, you've got the moon on the ascendant with applying to the fixed star Regulus, which is at 0 degrees Virgo right now, that degree on the ascendant. And the moon is applying the square to the sun. We do have this opposition with Saturn to worry about. It's about 13 degrees out. It's very wide, but it is going to be kind of like a thing on the horizon on the distance here. But I think that, especially with the moon, if the moon were even a little bit earlier in Leo, it probably wouldn't even be something that I mentioned at all. But being kind of right here on the end, it's hard not to. But this is something that will kind of rectify itself as as Saturn pulls away further from this degree. Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, is here in 21 degrees of Sagittarius, having long separated from the square of Saturn, so I don't think we have to worry about that. But just a sort of a fun kind of surprise Regulus selection that I'm not sure why I didn't write down for this one or for this look. Australia was sort of the initial location that I had tagged as having the Regulus election option. So they have it both where they could do the 12th Lunar Mansion election and then kind of turn around and do the Regulus election if they so wanted. And so the opportunity for the 12th Lunar Mansion talisman is going to be on November 23rd at just before 1 a.m. at like 0:53. And it's going to be kind of a setup similar to what the Regulus election was in the Western Europe version that I just talked about with the late degree. Well, this one we would push back a little bit further, actually. No, well, this is fine. We can keep the late degree. Sorry, I was thinking, I was getting ahead of myself. We can keep the late degree of Leo here rising, take advantage of the sun as the ruler of the first house. But you've got the moon in the 12th Lunar Mansion, applying that square to the sun. And, you know, she's fine. She's too far away from the Saturn opposition to really worry about. The sun's not afflicted by Saturn. He's 12 degrees away from it. And you could choose to do the Virgo ascendant with this one if you wanted to. If you would rather chariot out for the retrograde, or no, I'm sorry, for the separating, not retrograde, Mercury here, rather than the sun, I think that's totally fine. And this would be, like I said, the 12th mansion option if you wanted to go that way. But the Regulus option would actually be with the moon on the midheaven. Oh, no, it wouldn't. No, it would not, you dum-dum. Okay, so, see, I did it to myself. The Regulus, so I messed up a little bit here. So the Regulus option would not be this chart because what happens is that thing that I said I would rather die than do happens. You get Jupiter as the ruler of the first house. Jupiter's retrograde. We don't do that. So what you would do is you would actually repurpose that's what you would go to you would go to back when the moon was on the ascendant and just get the ascendant to be 0 degrees of Virgo rather than late Leo. And that would be a really great way to differentiate between the 12th Lunar Mansion and then the Regulus election if you wanted to try to do both kind of in one go, to do more the 12th Lunar Mansion talisman while the ascendant is still in that late Leo, and then when it switches over to Virgo, it's go time for Regulus because you really don't have a lot of time. You basically just have that 1 degree to do anything with. And I guess one thing that I forgot to mention too, I said at the very beginning, Regulus is a star that's of the nature of Jupiter and Mars, and typically when you're creating your election chart and you're trying to connect your moon, you want the moon to apply to one of those planets that a star is said to be of the nature of. Obviously the sun is not Jupiter or Mars, but Regulus has so many solar qualities to it that I consider the sun as a viable option both for Regulus and the fixed star Sirius, since they both have such strong solar qualities associated with them. So the last electional opportunity that we're going to talk about is actually a North American exclusive, and this is going to be for the fixed star Sirius, the star that I just kind of talked about or threw on there with Regulus. One of the powers of Sirius or associated with Sirius is like goodwill and honors from individuals and authority, and that's a pretty common keyword when it comes to fixed star talismans. You'll see that kind of often, and it's basically just getting anybody who has authority over you in a context to kind of like be on your side, to be nice to you, or to do kind of like what you want them to do kind of the easiest thing for you. And that's very malleable. It can be something that you can be used in a lot of different contexts. You know, obviously it could be like a parent maybe, or it can be a boss or a supervisor, anybody who has direct oversight of your work. It can be used, very literally for like actual authority, like getting police officers to leave you alone, or it can even be used in very specific contexts of authority, like bank loans or getting approved for things, being accepted into things by people who are sort of like higher up than you. So a lot of ways to use Sirius. It's also very helpful for ironing out wrinkles in long-term relationships. The reconciliation of spouses is what the texts say, but it just kind of like helping people listen and understand one another is a really beautiful power of Sirius. And finally, Sirius has some sort of like meta powers over like daimons or like spirits in general. So it's useful for people who like work with spirits more directly to establish and maintain those contacts. So that's sort of your Sirius talisman overview. In our election here, we're going to have the moon, or we're going to have actually Sirius at 14-ish degrees of Cancer on the midheaven, with the moon applying to the to the conjunction of that star. And the moon in this time is applying the trine to... Oh, is this our 9th Lunar Mansion election? Am I dum-dum? I am. I'm a complete dum-dum. And Sirius is a star that is traditionally associated with Mars and Jupiter, I think in that order. And when you want your moon to apply to those planets, either those planets, but Sirius has a very strong solar connection, and so with Sirius and Regulus, I always will accept for them moon connections with the sun. I think I think there's a strong solar quality in them that resonates very well with the sun and with the moon connecting with the sun, and those elections have paid off very well in sort of like experiences with them. So I definitely recommend that one. But all right, everyone, thank you all so much for stopping by and taking a look at what elections we have coming up. Like I said, we have a really decent amount, considering some of the difficulties that we have going on in the sky right now. And it's going to be really nice as we move forward in time, and some planets kind of twist and turn, back, retrograde, and direct. Saturn's direct now. I think Mercury and Mars are up next. And so we're gonna have to work with that, and that'll put some fun new dampers on our elections. Hopefully we have more coming up. But remember that fall and winter are really good times for fixed star heliacal rise elections, or not elections. But remember that fall and winter tend to have a really good. But remember that we also have our heliacal rise dates of fixed stars to look forward to as well, and fall and winter have a pretty nice streak of these stars to take advantage of. So take a look at what's coming up for your location and plan accordingly. But thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you all next time on our Sagittarius new moon, which is not a blue moon.